Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Sunny. How are you doing? Hi.
Wow, thanks for asking. I'm doing well coming out of a crazy busy week. But yes, now that I finally have some sleep and yeah, feeling great. How about you?
Now that you finally have some sleep, you're gonna take that away because we're gonna be talking horror films today. Hi. I'm good. I'm good. I have a fun trip coming up to an undisclosed location with undisclosed people, and I'm just prepping for that. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be nuts, hopefully, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Wow,
So
Andre, you're
there's
not
that.
gonna tell the fans that you're planning your
I
first
can't tell if
kidnapping?
I can't be
I'm so
stalked.
sorry.
Stalked. Listen, listen. It's not gonna be a successful mission. It's not gonna be a successful kidnapping if I have people following my trail. That's crime 101. Hello, BuzzFeed Unsolved taught me that. So
Well, no one
they
will be
can't
able
know
to follow your
anything.
trail in Wyoming anyway, so don't sweat
Oh,
it.
you're right. Well, thank you for telling them, Sonny. Um, I do not want to be stalked. The way that the protagonist of one of the movies that I'm gonna be talking about today is stalked. So just trying to segue into that. But no. I'm glad you're doing good. I'm good too. And indeed, hi all. Welcome to Scary Talk episode. Sonny, please remind me.
I'm pretty sure this is episode either 81 or 82. I want to say 82.
Great. So we still don't know. I think it's 82 too. So hi all, welcome to episode 82. Today we are doing we're doing the third part of horror film analysis because I love horror films and I forced Sunny to go along with it. So we're doing this. Sunny, are you a horror fan? I don't actually know.
You know, to be honest, I'm not. There are some movies that I've enjoyed, but jump scares will genuinely, they put me on edge in a bad way, so.
Okay. I love horror films. I think horror and comedy are like my top two genres, and it's
How do
funny
you
because
feel
I
about
really
horror
like.
comedy?
Hey, not bad. Scream. Fuck. Are there a
I
lot of
just saw
those?
Bad Hair come out on Hulu, which looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, it did look pretty interesting. By the way, that reminded me. So David and I recently went. That's my boyfriend. David and I recently went to this drive-in presentation that Hulu put together. It was called Huluween Drive-In, and it was just like
Wow,
just
what
a
a
fun drive-in
name.
experience. I know, creative, right? We got to see I Know What You Did Last Summer, and just like in our car, and that was fun. And we got like a goodie
Mm.
box with like candy and shit, and I don't know, that was cute. That was like a photo op, so
Wow. So
that
are they
just
gonna
shows you
pay us
that
$50 for advertising
for
or
that sponsorship.
what?
Oh, well, they paid me $50. No, that just shows you that you can still find things to do even with Rona. And that was just like a little fun thing. So yeah, that's how I'm doing. Anyway, I got the scariest movie I've ever seen personally that I'm gonna talk about. But first, I want you to go. What do you got?
Okay. I have a movie. So, as we mentioned earlier, I'm not the biggest jump scare fan. What I am is a big fan of movies that leave me deeply disturbed on a personal, emotional level.
Okay.
So, I mean, in that theme, last time I had analyzed Shutter Island. This time we're going to analyze Splice. Now, both of these movies are personal to me. I feel like I'm doing an Addison Rae bit here.
Yo.
So Splice is significant to me because I'm a mixed race person. Which is
Wow,
actually
that
not
is.
at all. It's not at all relevant because, long story short, there's actually a really fucked up history with that, with people treating mixed race people like it's something crazy, when in actuality, race is a social construct. There aren't significant genetic differences between races, so someone who's mixed race isn't necessarily more genetically diverse, actually. It depends on the person. Blah, blah, blah. There's my spiel. Mixed race people aren't hybrids. Thank you, world. But now that that's out of the way, when I was younger,
Yeah. Well, Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, they're not. I think maybe they're hotter, but other than that, not much different.
Yeah. But when I was younger, I didn't know that, and so I feel like I was always interested in like hybrids and like I don't know, all kinds of thoughts. So anyways, on that note, this film Splice, it came out in 2010. It was directed by Vincenzo Natali, and it was executive produced by, hopefully you remember this name, Guillermo del Toro, along with Don Murphy and Joel Silver. So if you remember Guillermo del Toro, he also did Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, basically a lot of really big, creepy movies. And he seems to be really into the idea of monsters, the idea of, humanoid monsters, kind of. And it's so interesting when you see a producer or director where you're like, I've never met you, but I already know your interests based on this fucked up line of movies that you've made. But yeah, we love Guillermo del Toro. He actually also worked on the second film that I'll talk about if we have time. But for this first film, Splice, it received generally positive reviews. This is just some more background. But it did not hit profit. So it grossed $27 million against a $30 million production budget. Let's change that, y'all. Everyone go out and buy a copy of Splice right now. Okay, so I'm going to go into a summary first, basically, and then I'll go into some analysis of a couple things that I thought were interesting. Although, as we go, I'm sure that things will come up. Feel free to interrupt me if there's something that interests you, Andre. The amount of twists and fucked up things that this movie has is actually mind-blowing. So, I'm sure there will be plenty of points. But I'm gonna hop into summary. Oh yeah, spoiler alert for literally everything. Like, don't listen to this if you want to watch the movie or
everything on this episode.
Spoiler
alert, everything on this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So picture this. You have Adrian Brody playing the role of Clive, who's this... he's played a couple things, but he's basically this, like, middle-aged, kind of quirky-looking dude, bigger nose. He looks like kind. He has, like, a kind face. And then Sarah Polley, who's, like, a blonde actress. I haven't seen her in anything else. But they play Clive and Elsa, who are both genetic engineers. Now, Clive and Elsa have really prestigious positions, and they're currently changing the world. And the movie starts out with them doing this by creating Fred and Ginger, who are, when you look at them in the movie, they're like dog-sized worms. They're disgusting. But they present Fred and Ginger at this big convention to huge applause from the shareholders and whatnot, because Fred and Ginger are basically genetic compilations of a bunch of different genes. And because of that, they can harvest certain genes and certain things from them that they can use for medications, for prescriptions. So that's actually the company that they work at. It's like a prescription company. Their goal is to create hybrids for medical use. And the company's called NERD, N-E-R-D, Nucleic Exchange Research and Development. So, now that Clive and Elsa have amazed the world with Fred and Ginger, they're like, let's do something even bigger and better. Let's make history, right? So they go to their employers, and they basically tell their employers, hey, let us use human DNA, and we can basically make stuff that you have never seen or thought of before. We're gonna make our mark, we're gonna change this world. And their employers are like, that's really sketchy, we don't want to get sued, this is approaching an ethical boundary, which of course it is, that's what the movie's all about. Don't do this, right? Who would have thought that the executives of a corporation, of a pharmaceutical corporation, would be on the right side of this plot? But as it turns out, they do seem to be the voice of reason in this scenario. So they tell Clive and Elsa, hey, don't do that. And Clive and Elsa, of course, say, okay, and then do it anyway. So their employers are just telling them to continue to use Fred and Ginger for more commercial drug production, but instead Clive and Elsa decide, let's just try this out on our own. And to be fair, Elsa's the one who really prompts it. Clive is like, Elsa, I don't know about this whole using human DNA thing. This seems really sketchy. And Elsa really pushes for it. She's like, do you want to just be a regular scientist, or do you want to be one of the greats, essentially? Which is a very...
You know how scientists think, right? Let's do something irresponsible, because do you want to be just one of those meddling, mediocre, lame-ass scientists, or do you want to be a really fun one?
We're not like the other scientists, Clive, is essentially what Elsa says. And also, I just thought that was interesting because this is a very Adam and Eve-esque beginning, which you see come up in a lot of movies, but you have this pair, Clive and Elsa. Clive seems like this sweet, kind of well-meaning, reasonable guy. Elsa is just like driven by something, where she is constantly trying to push the envelope. Again, very Adam and Eve, very like, eat the apple, Adam, and Adam's like, okay, you know, I sim for you, Eve, and then he does it. So,
Right.
so that's Clive and Elsa right now. Oh, and also they are dating, and they have a very cute relationship. That's also established.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're like unsure of how to continue. Like they're thinking about marriage and kids, basically, but it's clear that they're at a kind of transition point in their relationship because they're both in their late 20s or so, maybe early 30s. So instead, in secret, they decide to just try something out, right? Just put together some genes, mix the old slop, put together something, and essentially after it works and they actually get a viable embryo, Clive is like, all right, we figured out that we can do it. Let's go ahead and shut this down. And once again, Elsa says, no, let's just grow it. Let's just grow it and see what goes on. And so there's a really creepy scene where they have this like womb that's suspended in a machine, essentially, where you can see it through the glass. And some shit goes on, and Elsa has to reach inside the glass to like touch the womb and like put her hand inside it, and she gets like, it's like something happens inside and it like sucks her in. It's really scary. It's like one of the scariest scenes of the film, and she's like, ah, and she gets stung by something inside, and she pulls her hand out really quickly. But somehow after this very clearly foreboding scene, Elsa's like, no, like let it finish. And then as it finishes growing, and it's basically like quote unquote born, and the thing opens up and out slides this humanoid type thing that they don't name yet, actually, because it's still a lab experiment. So after this thing is born, I've been trying really hard to think about how to describe this. I really think that you should just Google Splice Baby, and you'll get an idea of how deeply creepy it is. A lot of this movie, which is what I like, doesn't necessarily use jump scares or anything. It's just deeply disturbing to even look at this character, which is when born, it looks like, I don't know, like a mosquito human. Like it uses its two legs kind of like a dinosaur, like they're bent down in a constant crouch position. And at first it doesn't have arms, so it's just this like crouching, flesh-covered little creeping thing with a ginormous head. And it doesn't have recognizable eyes yet. It has like eye slits that go back, and like a slit down the center of its so-called face where the face should be, and like a head sort of shape that's also slanted. How's my imagery here, Andre?
I think it is pretty good because I've seen the movie, and even just looking at pictures of it right now, I think it's pretty spot on. I definitely think the listeners should go and Google this, though, just to get the best picture possible.
For sure. Basically the creepiest semi-baby thing that you could imagine. Like, you can't even call it a baby. And the second it's born, it, like, jumps around the space that it's in, just, like, destroying things, super unpredictable. It gives the feeling of, like, a wild animal. It's super disturbing. And basically at this point, Clive is like, hey, let's kill it now. And then Elsa's like, no. So Elsa starts to raise it. She feeds it. It grows. And it goes through this drama process where at some point it is like non-responsive, and they put it in water, and Clive kind of tries to kill it, right? He pushes it down in the water, and it turns out that it's amphibious and it can breathe in water, and you're like, whoa, what actually is this thing?
What the fuck did they splice it with? Like, what, a frog?
No, it's so vague, it doesn't tell you it's the thing, but you just assume that they've spliced it with everything because of all the shit that it has. It develops wings as it gets older. So basically, so the older it gets, the more you start to see childlike qualities come out. Eventually we get to a scene where Elsa's sitting across from it, playing Scrabble essentially with it, and moving around words, and the thing spells out nerd on the ground. And she realizes that's because her shirt says nerd, right, which is the thing. Oh, it spells out Dren, which is nerd backwards. So she names it Dren, and now our creature has a name Dren. It's gotten to a child age where it still looks really creepy, but it's gotten a little cuter. It wears a little dress now. It has clothing. That's really key for, like, the animal-human transition, right? And Elsa's taking care of it. At this point, they can't keep it in the lab anymore. Like, this shit's getting crazy. And even though they've only kept her, I think for a month or two, she's growing at a really rapid pace, which is why she's already at, like, a childlike state. So they're like, hey, let's just take her into a barn in the middle of nowhere. That will definitely be helpful, right? So as Dren gets older, we get an increasingly complex and distrustful and sad feeling, because you can tell that Dren increasingly wants to be human, but can't do it, right? She's pulling out dolls and realizing that they don't look like her. She's wearing clothes, but there's still something really inhuman about her face. Oh, and as she gets older and approaches the teenage age, we actually get a new actress who plays Dren, who's drop dead gorgeous. I looked up her name earlier. She's a French actress who plays Dren. And essentially, Dren grows up and you're like, whoa, all of a sudden you look human, you look like an attractive young lady, go you, Dren. And although she still looks inhuman, like there's too much space between her eyes, things like that, and she can't quite speak, you can tell, again, from the way she moves, from the way she's perceptive to her surroundings, that there's a real, like, human consciousness and awareness there. So, Dren gets older, and she increasingly feels like she doesn't belong, which she expresses, and she asks for a cat, which Elsa eventually gets her, and it's cute to see, Dren with the cat. And there's a really dramatic scene where Dren goes outside and she goes on the roof, and Clive and Elsa run after her, trying to, like, somehow get her not to run away, and she opens wings like she's gonna fly away, and she looks back and she's kind of got tears in her eyes, and she runs into Elsa's arms and Elsa holds her, and there's still this sort of sense that they're close, that they've formed a family at this point, right? She's a teenager who's now grown up with them forever, she understands the language, she's really close to being human. But essentially, as she starts to see these inhuman parts of herself, things get crazier and crazier. So they notice that Dren kills her cat. It's a really crazy scene where she looks up and she's got blood all over her face and she smiles and she eats her cat. Which is interesting that it's used as this animalistic scene, because humans eat meat all the time, right? It's just that we wouldn't kill our own animals. But I'm gonna just assume if Dren had more access
Welcome to Vegan Talk number 3, guys. We're back.
Well, seriously, if Dren just had more access to fresh meat, would she have killed her cat? Here's the question to pose to the audience. What do you think?
Probably not. I guess it's a fair argument to make. We eat raw meat all the time. We eat sushi and shit, so... True.
Yeah, it's true, though. The eating raw meat is also... Again, just towing this line between human and an animal. But here's where things really take a dive. Are you ready, Andre?
I am prepared.
Okay. So at this point, Dren has become a teenager, and there's this interesting scene where she learns to dance. There's music playing, and she dances with Clive, and it's very pretty and interesting. Then there's another scene where Clive and Elsa are making love, as couples do, and Dren sees them, and it's like this really weird traumatic scene where she runs away, and it's just something that clearly, this is why sex ed is important, everyone, but it's a really weird scene. So as the movie goes on, God, I don't even want to just talk about this, it's just so weird and awful, but as the movie goes on, there's a scene where Clive and Dren, again, Clive is the fatherly figure here that's dating Elsa, are in this barn, and in one way or another, they're very close to each other, and then they start to make out, and it very quickly becomes this insane sex scene. Yeah. And when I say insane, insane. Dren starts to expand her wings. It's a whole deal.
Okay.
But basically, as things are escalating a lot, I think Elsa walks in, and yeah, it's kind of insane. And it's very interesting because the way it's described in some summaries, it says Dren overwhelms Clive with pheromones and rapes him. But that was not the sense of the scene, I will say that. But yes, and also at this point it comes out that Elsa did not use random human DNA to create Dren. She used her own human DNA.
I knew it. Great. Fantastic.
Dun. Yeah, again, twist after twist. So there's this insane scene. Clive basically at this point goes off on... Isn't this so ironic that Clive would go off on Elsa after this whole thing? So Clive goes off on Elsa and says that...
Well, if he feels he was raped...
I mean, I guess. That is fair. But he accuses Elsa of not wanting a normal child because she doesn't want to lose control, and instead raising one in a lab so that she could completely control it. Which, at this point, may be justifiable. But basically, they both kind of agree at this point they need to kill Dren. Which is insane. Like, you literally could have chosen to do this at any earlier point when she wasn't already, like, a sentient being, you know? It's just... Killing Dren at this... It's so ironic because killing Dren would have been the moral decision at pretty much any point before she was, like, a child, I think. Well, no, I guess before she was born is the idea. But... And yet, this is the point they choose, when she's a full-grown, near-adult adolescent who has all these thoughts and things going on, and then they're like, well, you know, someone's gonna find out soon, we're gonna kill her. I feel like it's more just lack of accountability for their own mistake in raising this monster. Basically, though, they go back to the barn, and they find Dren, and Dren appears to be dying. She's curled up, she's cold, she's not breathing. And they're basically like, you know, what are we gonna do? Oh, and here's the point where, actually, probably a couple scenes earlier, because they haven't been paying attention to Fred and Ginger, right? Their original worm creations that were the whole soup pot of everything. So Ginger turns into a male and kills Fred, and this all happens on display at another convention, and they get into big trouble, like, hey, what's going on? So that was sort of this...
You kind of just ran through that, though. Like, I mean, I feel like that's an important point.
Yeah, no, that is a really important point. And it's, of course, as it would turn out, foreshadowing. But basically, meanwhile, while all this stuff is going down with Dren, back at the lab, where they still have Fred and Ginger, as I mentioned, Ginger mutates and becomes male and kills Fred. And this all happens on display at a convention, and people are freaking out because they're expecting, like, happy Fred and Ginger, and then they see one of them kill the other, and they're like, oh my god, maybe this whole genetic splicing thing is worse than we thought. Maybe it is. Maybe there are repercussions to our actions. So that's happening. They're like, damn, we really gotta be figuring out how to satisfy the lab now that all this stuff is going on. And basically one of the corporate people comes down. They find out that there's human DNA in Dren's in Dren's protein samples, and he comes by the barn to say, like, hey, what the hell is going on? And at this point, Elsa and Clive have just buried Dren, because remember, she appeared dead. And they bury her behind the barn. Basically, they go behind the barn, and what's happened is that Dren has transformed into a male. Dun dun dun. Should we call her Drenner now? Should we call him Drenner?
Yeah.
So Drenner rises from the grave and attacks all of them. And essentially, he kills the corporate guy who's come through, Barlow, right off the bat. But then here's the crazy thing that happens. And again, this is why this movie is just fucked up on so many levels. But now in male form, Dren pins down Elsa and rapes her. And yeah, so at this point, Clive attacks Dren to save Elsa, but Dren overpowers him, and Elsa then, of course, turns back and tries to kill Dren, but she hesitates, and at that point, Dren kills Clive. And at that point, finally, after Dren has literally killed 3 people, there were 2 corporate people that Dren killed, Elsa turns around and kills Dren.
Great.
Yeah, what a conclusion. So... And here's the final fucked up part. There's no end to it. This is just unbelievable. So Elsa later finds out, well, you did this fucked up thing, but it turns out that Dren's body does have a ton of biochemical compounds that are really helpful for these medications. And her company, Nerd, files a ton of patents. At this point, the last remaining corporate person that she talked to at the beginning, who told her not to do it, meets with Elsa. This is the last scene of the movie. And Elsa is now visibly pregnant, assumingly with Dren's baby. And this corporate person offers Elsa a large sum of money to go through with the pregnancy, which Elsa accepts. And that's the end of the movie.
I mean, listen, just thinking about that pregnancy, I guess at this point, that baby will be... Well, it will be more than half human, right? Because the original Dren was already some percentage human.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, maybe it won't be as terrible, but you know, like if you still are like 30% lizard, even if you're 70% human, that's not great. That's not fantastic.
30% lizard, like not ideal. Honestly, Andre, I feel like I know some people now who are 30% lizard. Just kidding.
I know people who are like 40% bear. Are you kidding me? Anyway, okay. Well, so that was a very interesting plot summary.
Well, okay.
But
I do have a couple of thoughts on it, though.
Yeah.
My first is just that the appearance of Dren and the things that she goes throughout it feel very Uncanny Valley. Have you heard of the Uncanny Valley?
Yeah, but please expand.
Oh, for sure. So it was really interesting doing research on it because it turns out it was originally identified in Japan, which I didn't know. I had no idea. But it was originally identified in Japan by the robotics professor Masahiro Mori, and it was called Bukimi no Tani Gensho, which means basically creepy valley phenomenon, or uncanny valley as we call it. So...
And what is it, though?
No, exactly. So Masahiro found that this is because he was in robotics, right? So as the appearance of a robot was made more human, some observers would have a more empathetic emotional response, right? You put a pair of eyes and maybe like a little smiley face on it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's cute. Until it reached a point where all of a sudden the responses would become strong revulsion. And this is when the robot's appearance was semi-human, right? Like you're starting to really change it to almost have human features, but it's not quite human. That's why it's called the Uncanny Valley. However, as the robot appearance became extremely human, right, looking just like a human, the emotional response would again become very empathetic until it even approached human-to-human empathy levels. So basically, if it just had a smiley face on it, it would be like, yeah, that's kind of cute. If it looked just like a human, it was like, oh, that's really cool, and you nearly think of it like a human. But when it's in the middle, and it looks somewhat human, that's the creepiest. I think that's why dolls are used in a lot of horror movies, right? That sense of, like, that uncanny sense of it's almost human. Dren is a classic example where she almost looks human, but not quite, and that just unnerves us in some way. Any other examples you can think of?
When I think of Uncanny Valley, I always think of this video, now I can remember the name, but it's like a very famous, like, scary YouTube video.
Yeah, I feel like I've watched that video.
Of like a mannequin, like, in a room, and the mannequin's like singing to some song, and in there are like spliced cuts of like something buried in a garden, and I Feel Fantastic, I think it's called.
Oh yeah, exactly. Mannequins are a perfect example. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, but that's the idea, and I just think that is literally used not only even appearance-wise, but for what she's going through as well and her emotions, where she's sort of semi-human, and that constantly is making us uncomfortable and kind of sad because we don't know where to place her or how to think of her Dren. I also thought it was interesting.
I have a question before you go into your next point.
Yes.
Why do you think this movie wasn't as commercially successful as other films?
Honestly, I think... Well, that's a good question. Something about it wasn't as attractive to audiences. I'm not sure if it was bad marketing or what, but based on the content, I would just think there's too much... There's too much taboo and not enough jump scare. In terms of a horror movie, generally you want something that either makes you think, like Shutter Island, or something that makes you, like, bodily scared. And there's not very much jump scare in Splice to give you that sense of, like, really being scared. There's more so the what will make you think. But the things that will make you think are so fucked up, I think it passes what most people are looking for. You don't want, like, bestiality as like, it's a movie where bestiality is a central theme. So it doesn't surprise me maybe that the mainstream audience was not super eager to come see it. Although, you know what? After Shape of Water, maybe I shouldn't be saying that.
No, but Shape of Water is very different. Like, for one, it's not a horror movie, so that already expands its audience. Because I feel like horror, for as popular as it's become, it's still. I think it's never gonna be. There's still gonna be a shit ton of people in the world that are like, no, I don't want to watch a scary movie. It scares me. You know what I mean? Like, that's always gonna be a thing.
Totally,
And
totally.
that's not a thing with like a comedy. Like, oh no, I don't want to laugh. Like, that doesn't exist. So.
Totally. Yeah. And when you stack on top of that, on top of the horror elements, just the amount of lines that it crosses, even like genetic engineering is super controversial as a topic, and the way that they approach it, where you have this semi-human, is in and of itself super sketchy. So the things that then incest is your next top. You're telling me that they managed to combine bestiality and incest as themes, you know? Yeah, the movie's just doing a lot, maybe too much, without having.
But at least it makes you think, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if I was out on a Friday night and I was like, okay, I can watch this movie that's going to make my big brain think, or I can watch Halloween 42, The Return of the Revenge of the Comeback of Michael Myers, I might go watch Splice, you know?
Well, I agree. But I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't everyone. Especially,
Right.
Yeah, especially because it not only makes you think, but it's disturbing. You know, Shutter Island made you think, and it covered some pretty tough topics, but those topics of like mental illness and whatnot weren't at the level of incest and bestiality, just in terms of how taboo and uncomfortable they are. Yeah, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. What was your next point you were going to make?
Oh, I just found it interesting. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to compare Dren to Renesmee in Twilight. Which, hear me out. Both these, like, sort of hybrid mystic babies that we're given a chance to see. Like, the full pregnancy, birth, growing up of these characters. And I was thinking about with Renesmee, there's always something a little bit creepy about her to me in the movies. And I think it's that they skip her childhood. I never see a scene of Renesmee running around and like playing or like crying. There's only scenes of her sitting serenely and like being basically like this godly child that's super happy and that, or like just doesn't show emotion and that matures super quickly. Like she seems mature her whole life. And also, of course, matures super rapidly. And that's, I guess, just some kind of half-vampire thing. But it's interesting because they do the same thing with Ren. And I think part of that is just movie convenience, where it's more interesting to have a child than it is to have a baby for five years, you know, which is why you sort of skip that period.
Wait a minute. Is she half vampire or full vampire? Like,
She's half
is she
vampire.
conceived when Bella's still a human?
Yeah, it was when Bella was still a human.
But I thought there was a whole thing about, like, Edward being like, oh, I can't fuck you because, like, my dick is too intense and you'll die or something.
No, exactly. That's why, like, Bella...
How do they do it?
Bella really, like, begged, and then they did it once or something. But I think he also wanted to, like, not turn her, so that was their only option. So that's what they did once they were married. And they didn't think it would result in a pregnancy, but then it did.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, as sex does.
Seriously.
But all right.
Yeah, but
okay,
yeah,
so yeah.
Basically these like monstrous pregnancies, which Bella has, that you also see with this womb, and then these like rapidly maturing creatures. I just thought it was interesting, and I think that it comes from also that same idea of, I don't know, they're both given this place as like genetically mixed, but Renesmee is more clearly in the realm of human or semi-human. But you wouldn't know that from her dialogue in the movie. Like, she just is given no dialogue. I think the way Renesmee is treated in the movie is really weird.
I think it's more poor writing than anything. I don't think it's really supposed to convey some kind of mysterious, like, subplot.
Maybe.
Yeah, frankly. Like, I mean, even just the way that the child is displayed when it's, like, an infant. Like, the CGI baby. Horrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Nefarious.
Yeah, awful.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's that, like, half-monster feel where she's still supposed to be a vampire, but trying to attribute that to a human baby just doesn't quite work.
Right. It's just... and I guess you can't, like, powder a human, like, baby actor, like, full body. I don't know. That's... Yeah, they allow that, so...
Totally,
Yep.
totally.
Well...
But yes, so that's Splice. Whoa, that took a while, so... That's it.
Thank you for that.
What a movie.
I'm just sitting here kind of digesting everything you just said, thinking... making sense of it. It's an interesting movie. I might watch it again. You actually did surprise me with some of the things that you said, because I think I watched it so long ago that I'd forgotten a lot of it. So that refreshed my memory. I might give it another watch, because it sounds like a big brain movie, and I'm all about big brains. So
Massive
thank
brain.
you.
For sure.
And you know it. And I will now be sharing with you some analysis on Insidious. So,
Oh shoot!
have you seen Insidious?
I haven't.
It's really good. You have to watch it. It's really, really good. Listen, I don't know about 2, or 3, or 4, but you should definitely watch the first one. So, or 5, which is coming.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're really going that Paranormal Activity route. They're just, like, pumping him out. But speaking of Paranormal Activity, 8, technically, I think, is coming out in 2022. So they're still going at it.
Oh shit.
Yeah, there's just a shit ton of them, and they came out, like, every year for a while, and then they stopped, and, like, I guess they're gonna bring them back. So, can't wait.
That's so funny.
I know. Like the first one was really good, and I think it was so profitable that it made like sense to make a sequel, obviously. But like the quality really declined, kind of as quality does when studios just kind of grab a property and try to milk the shit out of it. Just like literally like making a movie, even if it's low budget, even if it's whatever, even if it's just a horror or whatever, like in a year, like year after, there was like 4 years, so they were just going, like, these movies were coming out like every October. That is insane.
That's like the writing process too. No wonder.
Right, like writing and post-production takes a long time. Like they really were like making these movies on a deadline, and they put them out, but it obviously showed that they had a deadline. And that's when it comes to film, it's for me, it's always quality over quantity. I don't think that way about everything. I think sometimes the other way around works just fine, kind of like this podcast. But but for films, I'm definitely all about quality over quantity.
For sure. That's why you watch the whole Resident Evil franchise, right?
Precisely, quality. Now, hey, to be fair, those movies took a couple of years to come out each, so don't shit on Mila Jovovich and the Resident Evil franchise, okay? Because I will come for you. Now, so Insidious. Okay, I wanted to talk about this film because this is probably, I don't know if it's my favorite horror movie of all time, but I also didn't even know what that means. But I will tell you that it is the horror movie that has scared me the most. This is the only horror movie in my life where I've actually like watched it and I have like vocalized fear. Like, like when there's a jump scare, you're like, ugh, or like, just like move your seater, like, ooh,
yeah.
Or like that was scary. But like usually I just do that in my head. I don't actually like go ooh.
Yeah.
Well, this movie, there's specifically one scene where I watched it and I was like next to my brother. Like I didn't even care that I was in public because like it hit me so hard. It happened and then I went like it just it was the most like ridiculous thing that I couldn't believe that I did that. But like it actually like unsettled me, and that I know that like for I don't know. I think people think that other people vocalize fear more than they actually do. I feel like most human beings, if you don't have like a YouTube reaction channel, your reactions to things are usually pretty like mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I will catch myself watching Saturday Night Live, which I love, and I always think after the fact like, oh, that was really funny. But when I actually think of me while I was actually watching the thing, I realized I didn't actually laugh at all. I just kind of like watched it quietly, but I still enjoyed it. Same with horror films. They still unsettle me, but obviously none has unsettled me as much as this one, because this one actually brought me to the point of going like, fuck, like I screamed. So that means...
Were you at the theater or were you at home?
I was at home and it was daytime. Like, imagine if I watched it in a theater, like in a dark theater. Like, that's how good this movie is. So, Insidious, for those of you who don't know, is this 2011 like small budget film made by James Wan, who had previously directed at least the first Saw film and some other horror films that were not as well received. But because of Saw and because he had like executive produced Paranormal Activity 2 or something, he he was able to use that as leverage when marketing Insidious. It's like, oh, it's like, it's made by me. You still remember, you still like me, right? Well, I made this new movie, come watch it. And people did, and holy shit, like, this was the most profitable movie of 2011, apparently.
Wow.
It made basically $100 million on a $1.5 million budget.
Whoa.
Just pretty insane. I mean, like a good horror film making 100 million isn't insane. Honestly, it's more insane the fact that they were able to make it for 1.5 million.
Yeah.
What the fuck did they pay Rose Byrne and fucking Patrick Wilson peanuts? Like, because they're recognizable actors. I'm kind of confused. Maybe they weren't back then.
Maybe they just accepted, like, this is the indie movie that I'm doing this year and it won't pay me as much. I feel like that's probably how they got him.
That's probably what it was. And you know what? I think people sometimes are like, why would actors do that? Actors will sometimes do indie films because they think it will get them, like, awards. Because indie filmmaking is usually much more focused on, again, quality over quantity. Here's the weird thing, though. I don't know if I would call it indie, given that it was produced by Blumhouse, which is basically like this horror, like giant studio house. Maybe it wasn't as big in 2010, though, to be fair.
Yeah, I feel like they've grown over the years.
Right. But even then, it's still like, indie horror is definitely not the kind of indie most actors go to when they want to, like, finally get their Oscar.
It's true. If you want to get an
usually
award,
indie
you don't
drama.
usually think indie horror.
Right. Right, exactly. But I mean, they made the right call because they didn't get nominated for an Oscar, but the movie was still very well received. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, so it obviously qualified to they wanted to show it there, and some other awards and shit, whatever. But the point is that it was a very profitable film, and I don't think it gets enough credit for reviving horror. Basically, is kind of gonna be my thesis statement here.
Ooh.
Before Insidious, like, okay, think 80s, think 90s, slasher films, slasher films and more slasher films. That's really all it was.
Yeah,
it was Nightmare on Elm Street, it was Friday the 13th, it was Halloween, it was Hellraiser. Like, I mean, to be fair, I'll give Hellraiser some kind of, like, it has some psychological horror in it, but for the most part, basically just slashers. That's what people really associated with horror for decades. And you have the early 2000s, and it kind of didn't stop. Like, you had fucking Halloween age 20 years later, and like Halloween Resurrection, more slasher. You had the Friday the 13th reboot. You had a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. To be frank, those last two were like around 2010, but still, like, if anything, that only makes my point worse. Like it proves that, right, that if anything, it was more up until the 2010s. That this, like, for straight up 30 years, all we had was slasher films. Right, because, like, if you think of 70s, I think you can think of, like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one, which I guess starts slashing, but really it's very much a psychological film, and it's like a really good film. You should watch it if you haven't. But after that, like 80s to 2010, slasher, and that's it, and it's kind of boring. And then you have this movie in 2011, Insidious, and it comes out and it kind of subverts audiences' expectations, right? Because it is very much an atmospheric film. It has jump scares, but they're very well made. They are deserved, not like the kind of jump scares where, like, the character hears something and it's like a squirrel hitting on their car window and it's a super fucking loud sound and it was nothing. You know what I mean? Like, those jump scares that are very undeserved, and I hate them because they're stupid. Just like, loud sound, that's scary, right? Loud sound. So very atmospheric, very well made. And it has this kind of, like, tight-knit, like, family structure to it, like, storyline, and that just makes it, I don't know, like, relatable, grounded, immersive. It's just fun to watch, and that's what this movie does. I think, I don't know, I think that given the litany of, like, lousy franchise reboots and installments when this came out, people really, like, flocked to it because it was something different. It showed because it made so much money. And that's great about it. I think maybe I should go into a little bit of a plot summary so you know more what I'm talking about. I guess I'm gonna end up spoiling it for you, but you should still watch it.
Okay.
So basically, you have this married couple, Josh and Renee, and they move into this house. They have sons. The only one that matters is Dalton, but they have like one other a boy and another girl. And they move into a new home, and one night Dalton, this kid, this like, I don't know, 10-year-old kid, is drawn to the attic, and he's like frightened by something in the shadows, and the next day he falls into this like inexplicable coma. So already like a very strong setup right from the get-go. After 3 months of treatment without result, the parents are allowed to take Dalton home, and after they take him home, like paranormal shit starts happening around the house. And they're like, fuck, what's going on? Is the house haunted? And so they like investigate, like, how do we get rid of like haunted house demon or whatever. But whatever they do to try to fix that doesn't work. They end up calling their mom over for like a dinner or whatever. And this is like the one scene that like freaked me the fuck out. Like the mom is talking to her son, which is the husband, and then the wife. She's talking to them about some like childhood memories or something, and she sees there's like this like red demon like right behind her son, and she freaks out. And that's when I freaked out too, because that jump scare came out of nowhere. Like I think that's probably what it was in retrospect, the fact that it came out of nowhere. That scared
Like
me so
dinner
much,
table
because
conversation straight to that.
yeah, you see it coming usually with jump scares. The music changes, or like, you know, it's very silent. I don't know. There's like a lot of cues for your brain to be like, oh, there's a jump scare coming.
Totally.
This one, it's literally like if I was talking to you about like the shake that I had this morning, and then all of a sudden, bah! Like
Totally.
this, it was fucked up. I hate this movie. So, that happens. Yeah, that's why I bring that scene up. But basically, eventually they're like, you know what? It might be like something else that's happening, and we're just missing it. Maybe it's not the house or something. They end up calling a psychic, and the psychic comes over, and she sees like the same demon that was like seen earlier in the movie. She's like, oh yeah, there's a demon here, but it's not the house that's haunted. It is your child. And they're like, what? And the psychic, the psychic explains to the parents that Dalton is not in a coma, that he was actually born with the ability to travel mentally to the astral plane, and he had been doing so in his sleep, believing his abilities to be just dreams. The kid didn't realize that he was literally like astral traveling. He thought it was just dreams, and at some point he traveled too far and he became lost in this purgatory realm called the Further, and that's the night when he like fell into a coma after he was in the attic. He went too far, and now his spirit is caught in this other realm whereas his body is still in the house. And so the psychic is like, we can all go like save him, so let's go to the Further or whatever. And so I think just the dad goes, and like the psychic like guides him as he's going to the Further. And that the way that looks is like the dad and the wife, like the husband and the wife, are sitting in a room, and the husband is like hypnotized or something, so he falls asleep and he will go into the Further. So all these scenes happening now are like happening in the Further, and you're seeing like the husband's spirit doing things, but its actual body, everyone's still like in the house just chilling. And I don't know, shit happens, scary stuff. He finds Dalton, but then at the end, and they manage to escape. They like beat this like old woman looking spirit, and that's who had like caught Dalton. I mean, I don't know, there's more stuff to this, but it's not really like worth going over. And so they rescue Dalton after they beat this like witch looking like demon, and also the original like red demon that I mentioned earlier. Bunch of demons in this place. They take Dalton back home. Like that what that means is like both Dalton wakes up from his coma, and also the dad comes back to like being, and they're like, yay, we did it. But then at the very end, like there's this plot twist where like Josh, that's the name of the husband, realizes that he had suppressed his memory from childhood, where he had actually seen that like witch looking old woman spirit that they beat up. He actually seen it when he was a child, and it's in some way he was actually like connected to it. So when he went to the Further to rescue his child, to rescue Dalton, the witch actually was able to possess the husband, and when the husband came back to the real world, the witch came with him in his body, possessing him. And so I guess the psychic old lady woman like realizes this at the very end. She's like, "Oh no, I gotta warn the wife." But then Josh immediately kills the psychic, and then the wife finds the body of the psychic. She's like, "What the fuck?" And then Josh suddenly appears behind the wife, and she turns around and gasps, and that's the end of the movie. So
Oh shit.
yeah, I hope you caught all that.
Yeah, no. It's like you think it's gonna be a happy ending, and then one last twist.
Nope. Yep. He's possessed. Yeah, and then there's sequels and shit. But basically, this is kind of like this is the origin film, and I don't know. I think it's very well, even though it like ends on a cliffhanger. It's very well encapsulated. I feel like it can almost just exist on its own, and it could have never had any sequels, and it would have been okay. But I like it. It's really well made, and I think James Wan did a really good job of scaring the audience. Like I said, just like the way these movies are, like this jump scares are set up. They're just very effective, even the one that isn't clearly very effective. I also think that it is a very scary film because it kind of goes back to this tried and true like haunted house concept. Even if the house isn't technically haunted and it's the child, it was marketed as a haunted house film, and you don't know about the the plot twist that it's actually the child for a long time. And I just think that's very effective and very atmospheric. Like gore films are very much about, well, gore and slash and blood, and that's scary, but there's many different types of horror that, like I said, weren't explored for a long time. And this movie kind of goes back to, like, I don't know, like the trope of haunted house films from like the 50s and the 60s. Like, this is like a thing that hadn't been done a lot up until this movie came out. There was like the Amityville horror film remake in like 2006, but that was shit. So
that is interesting.
Anyway,
and the name and plot reminds me a bit of Hereditary.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I could totally see that.
Yeah, totally. It's just interesting.
So I think that haunted house film concept is effective just because, like, the home is where you're safe, and the fact that that's no longer that place for you, it's very scary, and like it's supposed to be relatable to audiences and it's supposed to spook them because you're like, oh, I wouldn't want that happening in my home. And that's what the movie does. And I think had this film not been so successful, we may not have gotten other very well crafted haunted house style films like The Babadook or The Conjuring. Because like had audiences not responded to this, then we would have gone back to slashers. So I don't know. I think it's pretty great. It's pretty fresh. The acting is good. Yeah, and it kind of revived non-gore horror. So that's good.
Totally. Well, you've proven your thesis to me. I just read a really interesting paper at one point about 80s slashers, actually. And it was talking about the idea of a genre. 80s slashers were mainly marketed towards young men, and yet almost every main character would be a young woman, which you rarely see, right? Because usually, if anything, movies struggle to have female protagonists. But the reason why is because she would go through an intense process of victimization. Slashers eventually always came down to, usually you'd start out with a group of girls, and then you would have main girl, and it would come down to a fight between main girl and slasher. And you always knew main girl was main girl because she'd have, like, more masculine characteristics in some way or another, or, like, whatever you'd assume, like, she would be...
Well, honestly, it's funny, because watching I Know What You Did Last Summer, I realized, like, how strong this trope was, even up to the late 90s.
Yeah.
Like, it's either more masculine traits, or the final girl is the good, virginal one that isn't a slut.
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So you have this, like, cutout character to kind of... I don't want to say pander, but pretty much pander to male audiences so that they feel like they can identify her, or identify with her.
Yeah.
But it's still chosen to be a female actress because the idea is that young men don't want to watch another young man being victimized that way, like screaming, coming through with blood, constantly being paranoid this whole film. until winning at the end. So it's just interesting. Too, I think that the newer idea of horror isn't quite as focused on victimizing women, hopefully. Because here you have this whole family, but...
You even look at the new Halloween, right? Like 40 years later, and it's funny. It's funny watching it. It was a really good movie, by the way. You should watch it if you haven't. It was really interesting watching it because the movie literally, like, at some points, very obviously flips the script where, like, Michael Myers almost becomes the one being hunted now, especially at the very end. You know, I won't spoil that one, I guess, but. Yeah, it's pretty crazy because, like, Jamie Lee Curtis in the first movie, you know, she's damsel in distress for 90 minutes, and in this movie, she is for most of the movie super prepared to, like, kill this motherfucker. She has, like, a shit ton of guns, and she's very prepared and whatever. And then at the very end, it goes even beyond to now she's literally not just prepared for him but actually hunting him. So it's kind of weird.
Totally. You know, there's a Quentin Tarantino film that does that a bit too, or really does that. I forget what it's called, but there's a car of 3 women being chased down by this guy essentially, and at some point the cars stop and then it turns the other way where the women whip out guns and are chasing him the rest of the movie. Yeah. Dang, I'll have to look up the name of that maybe for next time, but yeah, that's a fun and interesting trope too, for sure. I just recently wanted to watch Jennifer's Body again.
I just watched it not too long ago. I no regrets. Really good movie. I mean, it's definitely, like, you can tell it's like a mid-2000s film. Like, it feels like it. But I don't know. It wasn't necessarily bad. Like, I think it knows what it is, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's what makes it good. Whereas if it take itself too seriously and it was the same film, it would have been worse. I liked it. I was gonna say that I love how you started you were making a point of, like, oh, you know, in a way it's kind of weird how, like, 80s and 90s slashers were so feminist because they all had female leads, but then it turns into, like, no, actually they had female leads because they wanted to, like, victimize them and humiliate them, and it's fun for men to watch damsels in distress run around and whatnot, and it wouldn't be fun for a tough guy to, like, be running around. So it's kind of like, well, anti-feminist.
Totally. I just feel like that's always the argument. I just recently, there's a really cool article that shows graphically the amount of minutes each movie has of men speaking versus women speaking. And of course, for like 90% of movies, there's more time for men speaking. And then, you know, for maybe 30% of movies, it's like way more time for men speaking, like an 80-20 split or something like that. Like, it's way worse than I even thought it would be. And of course, I think you could do the same thing across lines of, like, white actors versus like actors who are people of color. And I think the excuse there is just, like, we forgot. You know what I mean? That's always the excuse. And it's like, but you never forget to put a woman in a victim's role. Or, like, you never forget to put a person of color when you have this role that's, like, side role. It's like, no, you, like, put like non-white males in, essentially, when you need them, but never for that main central role, or for this role that gets a lot of speaking time, or whatever it is.
Listen, for me, honestly, just, you know, be misogynistic and be racist. But the biggest sin for horror movies is to be boring. I love how, like, that's my like, that's what I condone. Honestly, be misogynistic and racist. It's fine. No, but, like, I totally see and agree with all the points that you're making, but, like, it's at some point, I fucking hate this phrase, but, like, I'm gonna have to say it. I guess, like, if they were a product of its time, fine. Okay, I will go with that. But even if that's the case, you still can't justify boring and bland with product of its time. Like, okay, so these movies were misogynistic and racist, but for them to also be boring, like, you didn't have to do that. You could be the former too without being the latter one. So, like for example, like, overall, I Know What You Did Last Summer, fun movie. But what I did notice was, well, one, it definitely followed those two tropes, right? It followed the racist one by one. Actually, it didn't even have any people of color characters. So already, it didn't even have to deal with that. It was like, no, we didn't even bother including one, straight up. And the second one is, yeah, I mean, you definitely have, like, the women being very actively victimized. There's one guy that gets killed Oh no, I guess there's two guys that get killed. But when the guy gets killed, it's always kind of I don't know, very immediate. There's no chasing or screaming. It's just kind of like dead. And when the woman is like, you gotta be chased by through 10 buildings and like cry and shit and hide whatever.
Totally.
So it did those two things. But something else that it did that it didn't have to do was, not only does the virginal character survive and she's the final girl, but also her like super lame normie straight white boring boyfriend, and it's like, why is it that like the normie boring ass lame vanilla couple that like I was literally, I wanted the slut character to survive because she was fun and she was like, and at the end like she kind of gets like, you kind of get empathy for her. She gets like this cool character arc, and then she gets like stabbed in the face or whatever, and I'm like, oh my god. So we get Jennifer Love Hewitt at the end and her bland ass fucking lame boyfriend, like
Classic.
they survive, and their dialogue throughout the whole movie is things like, guys, stop fighting and we gotta help each other, and what are we gonna, it's like the lame, you know what, you've seen these films, like you've seen horror films from the 90s, like, oh my god, why? Like, the girl I wanted to survive was played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who I fucking stan. She was Buffy, and Shannon will be proud of me saying this. I wanted her to survive. She was like the asshole jock's girlfriend, but after the jock dies, she like kind of gets like redemption, and she becomes like fun and cool. And I wanted her to survive, and she fucking doesn't. And I'm just like, God.
Yeah, they like follow the trope to the point of making it a lower quality movie.
Right, but you know what it is? Like, they have to do that. I mean, like, not only do they have to follow the first two tropes, or I guess they did, because at the time that was what audiences wanted, because I guess audiences were misogynistic and mostly white, so like you gotta give audiences what they want. But I guess audiences also were, and to some extent still are, very much I feel like they're very much normies, right? And kind of, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not normie and average and mediocre and normal, but like, you know what I'm saying?
No, totally. Like the most widely appealing characters at the time might have been the Jennifer Love Hewitt and whatever.
Right,
guy.
which are like super like cookie cutter, goody two shoes, normal, lame, boring. It's like, God. So I'm glad horror films nowadays are a little bit different.
Yeah, and go Gen Z for making the standards for normie a bit better, at least. You know, I think normies now are cooler than normies were 10 years ago.
Oh, for sure. Oh, they still exist, but they're a different breed. Absolutely. I also, anyone listening to this podcast, it doesn't apply to you, okay? Even if you're a straight normie, you're actually not, just by virtue of listening to this trash.
Yes.
There's no way you could be and still listen. So,
Honestly,
everyone here is a gay freak. Whatever. So that was my vitriol towards 90s slashers. Also, that movie had two sequels, which I haven't seen, but I'm dying to see. One, the first sequel was called I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and the other sequel, if I'm not mistaken, I think is called I Will Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
What incredible titles! How much?
Listen, big brain creativity. Okay, I can't wait for the threequel. Oh fuck! Help me with this name. It'll be.
I never knew what you did last summer.
Oh my god! No, it'll be like, God. I swear, I remember what you did last summer. But he's like forgetting now.
I'm about to find out what you did last summer.
Anyway, guys, we hope you liked this episode. If you did, please make sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Actually, we never tell our audience to do this, but that is, I think, like one of the few podcast listening platforms where you can actually leave reviews, and that kind of like helps us like reach wider audiences. So if you want us to freak out more normies and turn them into gay freaks, please do leave us a 5-star review, or a 1-star if you feel like it. Fuck it, be honest, and do that on Apple Podcasts, and let us know if you have any future episode topic ideas. If there's something you want us to cover, just DM us at TalkScary on Twitter, or at TalkScary on Instagram, at Scary Talk on Facebook. Sunny, anything else?
No, thank you for listening, and I'm excited for our Halloween episode.
Yes, our Halloween episode will be coming out on Halloween during the day, so look forward to that. We're really like, we're barely making it. We're like, barely putting it out on time. But if anything, it's because you guys don't deserve to have a Halloween episode until Halloween. You don't get to just have it before Halloween, so that's what you fuckers are gonna have to deal with. You get it on Halloween day, not before. Deal with it. Thank you so much for listening. We love you. Thank you. We will see you on the 31st, and have a good night.
Good night.